Hey everybody, we're here at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook. He's Jason, I'm Chucky. So the sports betting podcast, Bookends, powered by STN Sports. But before we get into the big dance and Cinderellas and buzzer beaters, gotta talk a little bit NIT because our UNLV Running Rebels now are one game away from the Final Four. You know, I think they're playing Seton Hall, who's the number one seed, and maybe a little bit of a chip on both teams' shoulders. I know in UNLV's case, they finished higher than two teams in their conference. They have wins against San Diego State and Creighton, yet they weren't even really considered a team for the tournament. Yet they've done really well. Travel, a little bit of a bugaboo for the Rebels. Had to go back east to beat Princeton on their home gym, then fly back to Vegas. They beat Boston College here, pretty convincing in the second half. Now have to travel back east to play a Big East team in Seton Hall again. So a little bit of rough travel. The bettors have seen that. I mean, maybe they'll back UNLV by the time the game tips, but the game's gone from 3.5 to 6. So a lot of money on Seton Hall, but still a great run right now for UNLV.
Yeah, and you talked about the travel schedule of UNLV, the back and forth across the country, and I think that's why we've seen that move from 3.5 to 6, let alone to go that Seton Hall was kind of playing in this NIT tournament with a little bit of chip on their shoulder. We all know that Seton Hall and St. John's were kind of two of the bigger snubs of not getting into the big NCAA tournament. St. John's elected not to play in the NIT. Seton Hall did. We've seen UConn, Marquette, and Creighton, the three Big East teams that did get into the tournament, have gone undefeated, are all sitting there in the Sweet 16. And so there's a little bit of chip on the shoulder for these Big East teams that they got disrespected by only getting three teams in the tournament. The three teams in the tournament are playing great, and Seton Hall is carrying that momentum into the NIT. One of the things we always talk about in the NIT is who wants to be there and who doesn't. Right. And I think Seton Hall wants to prove that if UConn's able to go big, win the big dance, and Seton Hall can win the NIT, that should lead to next year, you better put some Big East teams into the big tournament.
Don't you think that's a little bit of the case for UNLV too? I think they're happy to be there. I think they wanted an opportunity to go dancing. Again, they had some big wins. I think they were 7-3 or 7-4 after that loss to San Diego State in the Mountain West tournament, 7-4 against ranked teams this year, yet they really weren't even a consideration, and they've played really well. I mean, their young guard Thomas, I think, as a true freshman at 18 years old, he's going to have a bright future for UNLV in the backcourt. So I think they've got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing kind of loose and free and great. They weren't a bubble team, despite the fact that they finished fourth in the Mountain West. They beat San Diego State. They weren't that team that was there. Again, we've talked about it. The terrible loss to Air Force.
Yep.
Kind of melted that chances away. They had to go a little bit further in the Mountain West tournament, potentially get into the finals. Maybe their name would have been brought up more. But again, I just think it's fantastic to see UNLV basketball still playing at this point in time, and obviously a big game here at Seton Hall.
There was a lot of chatter toward the end of the season that nobody really wanted to play UNLV. They had that bad loss at home too late in the season against UNR that they led almost the entire game before losing, then lost at UNR the last game of the season before ultimately falling to San Diego State in overtime in the tournament. But kind of a really good run right now. Hope these young kids can really step up. Again, it's been a brutal travel schedule, but a win here, they get some time off before advancing to the Final Four.
Yeah, and something to build on for the program. Again, just constantly continue to get better, and we'll see where they can take it next year.
All right, so we've chatted a little bit about the NIT. Now we're going to go dancing, the big dance, the tournament now. Sweet 16, and it's been really chalky. I mean, we talked about before the tournament started that we thought there was a lot more parity, that you looked at a lot of these smaller schools that could hang with the big schools because kids are there 2, 3, 4 years opposed to one and done, which we've seen the struggles of Kentucky over the last couple of years. But you've got all 4 number 1 seeds left. You've got 2 number 2 seeds left, 3 number 3 seeds left, I think, and 2 number 4 seeds. So really chalky at the top so far.
Well, we when we got through the first Thursday and Friday, I wouldn't say that it was necessarily chalky. We did see the monster upset by Oakland. We saw 3 11 seeds have a lot of success. We saw James Madison as a 12 seed
Yale,
knock off
Oakland,
Wisconsin. So there were Grand Canyon as a 12 seed knocks off St. Mary's. So they're Yale, probably the biggest. It wasn't the biggest upset of the tournament, but boy, was it a shocking surprise to knock off Auburn, who had won the SEC. So through that Thursday and Friday, it felt like we were going to have that Cinderella story. We were going to have one of these
disappeared over the weekend,
high seeds alive, and then between Saturday and Sunday, the favorites go 15-1 on the money line, with Baylor's loss to Clemson being the only upset on the money line, and they were also fantastic against the spread. I don't have the number in front of me, but again, just a very, very chalky weekend. And the other portion of it was that there were just so many blowouts. It wasn't even like there were competitive games or games where the Cinderella story had a chance to win. The Cinderella story was getting beat up by 20-plus points in a lot of these games.
Yeah, I think, and you look at how chalky it got. You're right, 15-1 money line favorites, betting favorites. I think we're 38-13, meaning that games that were roughly maybe around pick 1 or 2 points didn't move a lot, but some of the games that moved, betting favorites that they bet, 38-13, and I want to celebrate too that one of our lucky guests had a $50 8-teamer that hit that paid over $130,000. And you think about that game, one of the teams they had was Purdue, who Carson Barrett of Purdue had appeared in 5 games this year for a total of 6 points. They cleared the bench. He hit a 3 with under 10 seconds to go. The game went from they were winning by 24 to 27. The line was 26.5. So sometimes you have to be a little bit lucky. But again, tremendous win. Want to celebrate that. I think a lot of our guests did really well on some of these favorites throughout the tournament.
Yeah. Again, it was a losing weekend for us between the 4 days, Saturday and Sunday. Saturday being in particular the worst day of the tournament. And there were some chances for some teams to knock. We saw Oregon take Creighton into double overtime. That would have been an 11 seed that potentially advanced. We saw Texas A&M with a kind of a miracle comeback on Houston, down like 17 points with 4 minutes to go, able to tie that game up with a desperation kind of 3 heave with 1.2 seconds left on the clock.
I'm going to interrupt.
Texas had almost pulled the upset against Tennessee in a game that was one of the ugliest games of the weekend.
Well, don't get me started on the Oregon Creighton game because I love Altman. I mean, he's a great coach. I mean, every year that he's been in the tournament, they've won at least one game. They really were in control of that game against Creighton, although they only had 2 guys that were really scoring a lot. But Dante was having a career game, played phenomenal in that game, but he's a 60% free throw shooter. So if you look at their entire team and their entire bench, he is the worst free throw shooter on the team. Now, who are you going to foul if you're Creighton, if he's on the floor? And he's on the floor, and he gets fouled. You have a 2-point lead. He misses the free throw. Creighton comes down and scores. Game goes into overtime. Not only does Creighton win, but they cover the spread. You kind of saw the reaction of Altman afterward, but to me, that's coaching. You can't have that guy on the court being a 60% free throw shooter, knowing he's the guy that's going to get fouled.
Yeah, it was a disappointing loss. I thought that they were the better team in that game.
Absolutely.
And now we'll see the Creighton Tennessee matchup, which I think is a fantastic matchup. But as we go back to that first round, you talk about the teams that did advance, of where we sit today in the Sweet 16. For you, who is the most surprising team that's still alive in the Sweet 16?
To me, it's easy. It's the North Carolina State Wolfpack. I mean, here's a team that was ranked 10th in the ACC going into the tournament. Had to win 5 games in 5 days. Had to beat Duke and North Carolina. Then had to travel, which I didn't think they would be. I thought they would be kind of winded getting into the tournament. Has 2 tournament wins right now, and they've been scoring too. I mean, I think their last 5 games have all gone over. So their last 3 conference tournament games and their 2 NCAA tournament games have both gone over. But for me, it's NC State.
And no doubt they're the 11th seed. They're the highest seed left in the tournament.
To me, that's really the only true Cinderella story left.
They pulled the upset over Texas Tech, who was the 6th seed, and then they get the gift of Oakland knocking off Kentucky. So they end up as a 5-point favorite in the round 2 game as an 11
and they could have lost that game, went into overtime.
But for me, it's Clemson, number 6 seed Clemson. They were a dog in their first game to the number 11 seed New Mexico. They pulled the upset there, and then they go beat Baylor as a 5-point underdog there. So now they go into Arizona. But I think not shocked in NC State. NC State being the 11 seed, but this team's won 7 straight games in a row. They won the ACC tournament game. They've caught fire, been playing very, very well. But Clemson, who was really, really good in kind of November, December, and then fell apart in January and February, really kind of caught fire here to knock off New Mexico and Baylor. And I thought the Baylor upset was a big one. Baylor really struggled shooting in that game, but Baylor was a team that I thought could potentially give Arizona a little bit of trouble from a defensive standpoint. Clemson, though, I think is going to be really, really up against it in this Arizona Wildcat matchup.
I think NC State will too. For a team that wasn't even a bubble team and just talked about that they had to go on that big time run, and Burns has been phenomenal. I mean, just a big-bodied guy in the middle that has really kind of taken over games, and his kind of infectious personality and the way he plays on the court has just really transcended that whole team to get fired up. I mean, they've been on a great run, and again, a team that I'm not even sure would have gotten an NIT bid, let alone make the run that they have so far in the tournament. So we're going to kind of go through the games and break some of these down a little bit for you guys. So UConn and San Diego State. UConn comes into this game an 11-point favorite. It's a rematch of last year's championship game that UConn won 76-59. I love San Diego State's D, and I think that they can D up with anybody in the country. But I look at UConn, and they're just an offensive juggernaut, and they are just tough to slow down. You look at what they did in last year's tournament, what they've done in this year's tournament. They cover and win by double digits in every game. And this year's San Diego State offense is worse than last year's, where they got beat by double digits. I just don't know if they have enough offensive firepower to hang with the Huskies.
Well, Trammell and Leday have been absolutely fantastic.
Phenomenal.
They know what they're getting into. They have played this UConn team before. They get to be a little bit of the chip on the shoulder. Hey, you guys beat us in the championship last year. Let's go and play. But this feels like there's a car on the track, and UConn's coming through. UConn went through the entire NCAA tournament last year and covered all of their games against the spread. And they've covered both of these games against the sred in their first two matchups. It got close.
You don't have
there.
To tell me that.
It got close there in their Northwestern matchup late. But again, UConn's just they're like a five-headed monster. There's no one guy that's going to beat you between Newton, Klingon, Spencer. They've just got so many guys that they can go to and score. They play great defense. San Diego State, between Trammell and Leday and Waters, the problem is they go through these scoring droughts, and if they hit a scoring drought in any manner against UConn, this game it could be a 5-point game to a 12-point game to a 15-point game, just like that. It's the biggest spread on the board with the 11, and I don't think that's really a disrespect to San Diego State. I think it's just the utmost respect to where this UConn Huskies team
it's ticked up a little bit,
and where they're playing, and the fact that they are not looking to just win games. They are looking to dominate games. They are not happy when they're just winning. They're not happy when they're going in with a 15-point halftime lead. They want more, and that's why they're the number one seed in this tournament.
Yeah, I think that number will go up a little bit. Another game now is Iowa State and Illinois, where this number has actually come down a little bit. And I think when you look at Illinois, you can make a case that this is arguably the most exciting offense in the country right now, led by Shannon and Hawkins and Damask. They can score with anybody. We know that Iowa State can play some D, but it is just awfully tough to shut down the Illinois offense. It's just, can they stop Iowa State too? Because their defense gets shredded pretty much by everybody in the country.
This to me is the top game of the Sweet 16 matchup between, again, and we talked about that East bracket where UConn was the 1, Iowa State was the 2, Illinois was the 3, and Auburn was the 4, and those were top 10 teams in the country all put in that same bracket. So this Iowa State running into Illinois, this is an absolutely fantastic game. You talked about Terrence Shannon Jr. He's on a path to be the player of the tournament.
He's elevated his game in the tournament.
Absolutely unbelievable in the Big Ten tournament. Absolutely unbelievable in their first two matchups. They did have softer matchups. They did get the gift of Duquesne knocking off BYU, so they got a little bit of a softer game there. The one thing I thought was interesting here is that Shannon, if you remember, was a transfer from Texas Tech. So this is his first year at Illinois. He was 6-0 at Texas Tech versus this Iowa State team. So he only averaged about 10 points a game in those games, obviously playing at Texas Tech. But again, something that maybe Shannon has that is able to break down this Iowa State team.
And every time he drives to the hoop, if he doesn't score, he gets fouled.
Oh, it's unbelievable. That could be a big part of this game is how much they let him play and how much the fouls get called. Iowa State's got exceptional defense. Iowa State has, again, not a one guy that's going to score a bunch of points. They've got 4 or 5 guys that all average in that 10 to 14 point range that can all be dangerous from that standpoint. Iowa State probably is going to have to catch some fire from 3-point land because you talked about Hawkins. We think about Illinois and we think about scoring, but they've been playing really, really good defense here of late. And then you talk about adding in that other guy, Damask, throws
Right.
in the triple-double, I think only the 10th triple-double in tournament history in his big game. So this is one I have circled. I think this is an absolutely great game. And look for this on Thursday. This will be our match of the day where you can get a 10% odds boost on Thursday on the Illinois-Iowa State matchup.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting game. Again, one of the few games that you've actually seen the total come down. Just real quick, or the side come down. Just talking about scoring in the tournament a little bit. I know that we talked about before the tournament started that scoring was up this year. There's been 4 games this year where at least one of the two teams has scored 100 points. That's more than you've seen in the last 25 years in the tournament as a whole. You still have the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, the Final Four, and the championship game. So it kind of speaks volumes of the difference in the college game today than it has been over the last 10 years.
Are you bringing up that scoring because the next game you want to go into is UNC versus Alabama?
It is. It is. It is. I think you look at this game, and it's you look at North Carolina and how dominant they were against Michigan State, and I worry about Bama's kind of D and rim presence in this game to be able to stop.
I don't know that we're going to see any D
Carolina
or rim presence
right.
in this game.
And that's what scares me a little bit is that I think Carolina is going to be able to score at will. Can Bama hang enough to keep this game close? We've seen this number go up too now, where North Carolina's around a 4.5-point favorite.
Yeah, talk about scoring. This total is 173.5, so one of the higher totals you're ever going to see in a college basketball game. Interestingly enough, I look back the last time these two teams played, it was November of 2022. Alabama won the game 103 to 101.
Which might be the case again.
So 204 points.
Yeah.
Both teams scored over 100 points. Mark Sears has been absolutely incredible for Bama. We all get to watch Mark Sears' mom dance around during the game. She's kind of been one of the fan favorites of the cheers and her outfits and her cheering and shooting free throws as he's shooting the ball. But Sears has definitely led Alabama. They're definitely a run and gun team. Nate Oates has kind of brought in that offense to do that. It'll be interesting because that's one of the things that North Carolina wants to do as well is get up and down that floor. And so I think that this is going to be a very, very up-tempo, exciting games. We'll see these teams chucking the threes, getting down. Obviously, Baycott, the big man in the middle for North Carolina, is going to have a lot to say about that on the inside for Carolina. And as much as 173.5 and expecting these guys to go up and down, but this game's going to come down to who's able to make their three-pointers.
Right. I just think you look at North Carolina's offense, and I just don't know if Bama can stop them or not. I know they'll be able to score some
Yeah,
points.
and this is a number 1 seed versus a number 4 seed, and only a 3.5 to 4 point spread. So this is
but
a
it
close
has
game.
ticked up a bit.
This is a winnable. This is a winnable dog. I'm not saying Alabama. Where we're seeing some of these other 1 seeds are pretty big favorites.
Right.
Bama. This does feel like a game that they can win, and I wasn't really high on this Alabama team coming into the tournament. They had matched up with Charleston in their first round, and then I thought that they were going to have to go into St. Mary's, which what I thought would have been a very, very interesting stylistic matchup with St. Mary's slowing it down.
Stylistic, I like that.
But they got to go into Grand Canyon.
Right.
So Alabama has had success, but with a grain of salt in that they beat a 13 seed Charleston and they beat a 12 seed Grand Canyon. So maybe something to think about as you look at there is that they've had a soft path to get to where they are today.
So let's look at now. I know you talked about Clemson a little bit before. They're kind of your kind of Cinderella story. They play Arizona here. They're a 7.5-point underdog. And here too is, do they play enough D Clemson, and are they big enough and athletic enough to compete with Arizona?
Well, for me, this matchup, and there's a lot of matchups as we go to the Sweet 16, but this is the biggest mismatch for me as we sit in the Sweet 16. I think Arizona, all the tool. Now, again, we've seen this Arizona team, not show up, be late to games, and what I mean by that is they struggle in the first half and then they come back and bounce back in the second half. We kind of saw that throughout their Pac-12 play. But Clemson, I think, is playing a little bit over their head right now. P.J. Hall is an absolutely outstanding player. I think that the interior defense is going to be matched up well to be able to shut Hall down. Chase Hunter is the other kid that had a really good game for Clemson. But they're going to need Clemson. They're going to need to shoot really, really well in this game to be able to hang pace with Arizona, because Arizona, again, is another one of those teams that has 4 and 5 guys that can score the basketball, led by Caleb Love, who I think is going to be able to drive the basketball and take the ball to the rack against this Clemson team, get their big guys in foul trouble, and then that's just going to lead to more trouble. So this is a matchup that I really do like Arizona in this matchup.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I just think that, are they athletic enough to compete with what Arizona is going to bring? But, I know we talked a little bit about offense in this North Carolina game. Now we're going to talk a little bit about defense with Houston and Duke. I mean, you look at this Houston team, and they play a smothering D. Duke's going to have more than just Flipikowski in this game. And you think about Vermont, who held Duke to 64 points. Duke's held to 64 points by Vermont. What is Houston's defense going to hold them to? And that's where I think the big key is, that Duke's going to have to be able to create offense, come off the pick and roll, and score. And those are the things that Houston's D does so well. It's going to be tough. I think an interesting prop would be it's the lowest total on the board, too, by almost 10 points. Does Duke get over 60 points or not in this game?
Well, the one thing for them is the way McCain is playing, the three-point shooter. I think he made 8 threes against James Madison, which broke an NCAA tournament record. If he's able to have that confidence in shooting the threes to go along with Roach and Filipkowski, Duke is a dangerous team. Again, they're the Duke Blue Devils, and despite the fact that Krzyzewski's not there, John Schreier does have a pretty good team. If the freshman's able to shoot, if they're able to make their threes, because that's what Houston's going to do.
D, right.
They're not going to be able to play in the interior with Houston, and they're going to have to be able to find a way to stop Houston in their interior,
right,
in their 3-point shooting. Houston can play both that defensive game and the offensive game. They had to play the offensive game against Texas A&M in this last matchup,
right,
where we kind of saw them squeak by. But I think it was a big hurdle for them to get to the Sweet 16, kind of get Kelvin Sampson to get a couple wins, and now what a matchup here with Duke. Again, another number 1 seed with a short favorite. This will actually be our match of the day on Friday. So if you're looking for a 10% odds boost on Houston and Duke, that'll be our Friday match of the day when you log into the app.
And we talked about so much scoring, about 4 games of getting to the 100-point plateau more than any other tournament, and the game we talked about with North Carolina. But I mean, this game is going to be at a different pace. Again, the lowest total on the board by a wide margin heading into the tournament. Let's look at another game on the board right now, and that's going to be, we talked about earlier, NC State and Marquette. NC State, an 11 seed coming in against Marquette, and you talked about the Big East with Marquette. To me, it's, they're the Cinderella team. How long can they keep this going? Burns is a big part of that offense. They're fun to watch. A lot of scoring for them. 5 straight games, as I mentioned earlier, have gone over the total. But do they have enough to compete with Marquette?
Yeah, we're talking about obviously probably the hottest team in the country after going win the 5 wins in the ACC tournament, and then their 2 wins. Again, I talked about the big win over Texas Tech, where they were a dog in that game, and then they kind of got the gift to come back and beat Oakland. So again, their path was made a lot easier by the loss to Kentucky. Marquette earned the number 2 seed in this region for a reason. Shaka Smart, one of the best coaches in the country, and we talked about this Big East bias of these Big East teams, and they've talked. Believe me, these Big East teams and these coaches have talked about it. The Big East, Marquette is not only representing themselves, but they're representing the Big East, and I feel like the Big East has a monster chip on their shoulder that they want to advance. Obviously, all these teams want to advance,
right?
But there's a definite angst of these Big East teams to want to prove their worth throughout the tournament.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's we'll see how it plays out for them. But
yeah, and Kolek has been fantastic for Marquette, so he's a guy to look out for. And again, NC State has made this run. I don't know that they have enough defense to overcome what Marquette can throw, but Marquette's another one of those teams. And again, kind of the ups and downs, but it's the ups and downs of playing in that Big East tournament. I think that again the break of Clemson or NC State was able to go win these 2 games after winning the 5 games in the NCAA tournament. The worst thing that could happen for NC State is to have another 4 and 5 days off like this to get back to reality, where you talked about they finished 10th in the ACC, and sooner or later that team's probably going to show up, and we'll see if they can get by this weekend and stay hot.
So the next game we're going to talk about, for me, is probably one of the more intriguing games of the tournament, and that's Gonzaga against Purdue. This was a Gonzaga team that wasn't as dominant this year, lost in their conference final against St. Mary's. Hasn't been talked about this year kind of as a team that can make the run, but here they are in the Sweet 16. They run into the number 1 seeded Purdue Boilermakers here. You look at the Zags, and they come in red hot. They don't foul at all, but they only run barely a 7-man team. They really have no bench. And you look at Purdue and Zach Edey, who, I mean, he draws fouls at a record pace. They're going to really have to play the perfect game here. Purdue's only a 5-point favorite, but this is just a real contrast kind of in styles for me. And both teams, I think happy to be at the Sweet 16, especially Purdue. We know what happened to them the last couple of years, but a huge contrast in styles. Really want to see these two coaches, how they match up and how they scheme and game plan for this game as well. But this is one of the games I really want to watch.
Yeah, from a coaching standpoint, obviously we've seen Mark Few and Zags have a lot of success in the tournament, and Matt Painter and Purdue have been on the other side of that fence, really struggling in the tournament. This was a matchup that I think a lot of people have in their brackets just because Gonzaga had McNeese State in their first round, and then as the 5 seed, they had Kansas as their number 4 seed. And Kansas playing without McCollum wasn't the Kansas that we were all expecting. So I think a lot of people had that upset, and maybe it was, again, I keep talking about the easier path, but Gonzaga potentially had that easy path with the injury to the Kansas team and that path. But now they're where they want to be. And again, from which number 1 do you really want to play that's got to be feeling the pressure? There's no doubt the Boilermakers are feeling the pressure. Nemhard has been absolutely fantastic for Gonzaga. But one thing I looked at, of all these matchups, these teams actually played this year, earlier this year. They played in November. Purdue won 73-63. Edey, I think, had 26 points in the game. But the one thing that I look at from that standpoint was the style, and I didn't go back and look at that game and watch that matchup. But again, I think a Zags potentially, I'm not sure whether they want to speed this game up or slow this game down and play more of a half-court game, but that total was 136, 73 plus 63. The total in this game is 154.5. So if you look at what we've got, the total posted at 154.5, I just ask myself, man, they played a slow-down pace the last time they played in November.
And they don't foul, so that doesn't add the extra. Not a lot of free throws. So that just something to look at there. I didn't put a lot of time and effort into looking at that particular game, but I need to go back and see why that game only had 136 points. The team's not shoot well. What happened there? Because the total of 154.5 here seems like an easy under bet in looking at the matchup last year. And obviously, when we go into these Sweet 16 matchups, you're going into those big monster stadiums where the eye drops are a little bit different for these kids. The crowds are going crazy. Something to look at here. But I mean, literally, you're going into these stadiums that some of these aren't even normal basketball stadiums that they're going into. So sometimes the unders in these first matchups are something to look at, and then when they play the second game, be it Saturday or Sunday, when they get a little bit of time in these venues, those games tend to have a little bit more scoring. Yeah, I mean, all these games are really good. I mean, these Sweet 16 matchups are tremendous. We talked about really wanting to see the Gonzaga-Purdue matchup, the Iowa State-Illinois matchup, but this is another one for me. It's the Creighton-Tennessee matchup, is that Creighton, who I had winning my bracket, just kind of went outside of the top 8 teams in the country to have them winning the bracket. But I think you look at Creighton. They were lucky to win that game against Oregon. They really should have lost that game. Again, going back to the way that was kind of coached at the end, I really think you let Creighton get to this point. They've got a strong bench. They can shoot threes with anybody in the country. I think they're one of the top 2 3-point shooting teams in the entire tournament. The one thing is they're not real physical, and they don't play great perimeter defense. They kind of draw everything into the middle a little bit, and that's Tennessee's strength. We've seen this game open up and come down and then shoot back up again, so a late push on Tennessee here. I think it's a tough matchup just from the styles of play for Creighton, but for me, again, I think they're one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country, and if they're hitting those threes, they can win this game.
Yeah, and from a Tennessee standpoint, you have to overcome Rick Barnes, and we've talked about his challenges in leading teams, whether it was at Texas or at Tennessee, and getting his teams, really far into the tournament. They played one of the ugliest games I saw in the second round after knocking off St. Peter's in the first round. They played Texas in the second round. They were 3 for 25 from three-point land. The only good thing for them is Texas was worse and shot worse a percentage. I thought it was one of the ugliest games of the tournament, and Tennessee only squeaked by with, I think, a 2-point or a 4-point win. It was one of the only favorites of the week that from against the spread standpoint didn't cover. Ziegler, who's their guard, who was out last year, didn't play in the tournament when, again, they made a great run, is back this year. He's been their leader to go along with Dalton next. So they do have the tools to be able to get there. And obviously it's a 3-headed monster: Alexander, Kalkbrenner, and Shireman for Creighton, and Doug McDermott. I was a little bit surprised in this line This game opened 2.5. We actually went down to 2, expecting a little bit of Creighton money, and it's gone actually.
Which we did early, and then it's gone back up.
It's gone in reverse.
Right.
It's gone Tennessee back to 3. And so that was one of the line moves that surprised me. On the flip side,
I think it's the physicality, though, of Tennessee, and that's why is that Creighton just isn't a physical team. And I think in Tennessee's case, they're just bigger, and I think that physicality plays into it in the middle. Creighton's going to have to hit those threes, I think, to make this a game.
I think we're going to see late Creighton action on Friday, despite the fact that this line's moving back up to 3. Going back and looking at the way Tennessee has played, there's not a lot of faith there with Rick Barnes and those guys to be able to overcome this Creighton. I think this is a good spot potentially to play the dog and take a little bit of money on the money line, because I think this game's a coin flip and see who comes out and plays well.
There really are some great games for the Sweet 16, and then depending on how it all shakes out going into the
going back, what was your Final Four? I don't recall your Final Four. Are you still alive everywhere?
Not everywhere. Creighton, I believe, and UConn were the 2 teams that I have left.
Okay, so you got knocked out in the Houston Marquette.
Yep.
What did you have, Kentucky or something?
I had Kentucky. Yep.
Okay,
yeah.
and then
I was taking a flyer on Kentucky.
Carolina, Arizona region. What did you have there?
I can't remember.
Baylor?
It might have been
Baylor.
Yeah.
I still have all 4 of them. Again, I was a little bit more
Right.
chalky, but I had UConn, Arizona, Marquette, and Tennessee.
Right.
And as much as I like all of those, I'm a little bit fearful of the Tennessee getting knocked out. I do like UConn, Arizona, and boy, if Marquette can advance, what a matchup's that going to be against the Houston Duke winner. But I am fearful now of Tennessee. I really think that Zaga and Creighton, I think that I like Gonzaga as a dog, and I think that could be the region where we potentially see the 5 and the 3, where we don't get a number 1 or 2 seed if the Zags are able to knock off.
I think Creighton gets
1.
through here. They're a team that can get to the national championship game, and that's kind of what I was looking at with my bracket. I'm talking about college hoops again. I think all these matchups are great, but I want to touch on last man standing. 29-70 contestants were in last man standing. The prize pool, $59,975 aggregate payout to the winner. But guess what? There's only 220 people left. I mean, it is, for as chalky as the tournament has been, it's just, when you looked at where we were last year at this point, I think about 3 times as many contestants left to where we are right now with 220 people left.
That's a surprise considering how chalky things were and how the results were for the betting public. Obviously, last man standing knocked a lot of people out, but the betting public had a very, very successful Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Thursday, we got a couple of the upsets that did the book well, but cashing tickets was definitely being done on the guest side of the counter Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and they're going to take all that money and they're going to try and have a big Thursday tomorrow, or as we come on the week with the beginning of the NCAA tournament again, and the beginning of Major League Baseball regular season on Thursday.
Before we get to the boys this summer, I just want to touch on the women's tournament as well.
Okay.
I know UNLV got knocked out early, but I mean, it's been exciting, and I think you look at our handle and the way guests have played it and asked for the games on TV. When it's games that involve South Carolina, LSU, and Iowa, and Caitlin Clark, it has drawn a huge handle, and it's really shaping up to be a really good tournament as well.
Yeah, the women's
very chalky as well.
The women's tournament, our handle is doubled compared to last year. And again, a lot more betting propositions on the women's tournament. It's fully on the app. All the games are on the app. But again, much more attention to the women's tournament. And I think that's because of the dynamic personalities that we have going into it. Whether it's the coaches, whether it's the players, and obviously Caitlin Clark.
Coaches is right.
Caitlin Clark and what she's doing is absolutely fantastic. And again, you can see that she's playing with a little bit of anger and stuff like that. Watching her throughout the regular season, you didn't see this kind of I'll call it angst, but you've seen a lot of the replays of how kind of angry and mad
she's
definitely playing with a lot of gumption and wants to go and get through this thing.
Kind of a contrast to what we've seen with her the last couple of years.
You haven't seen. You just saw her score the points, but you didn't see this
that raw emotion,
the feistiness she seems to have in her. And so they're definitely on a drive. And obviously there's a lot of watching where Iowa's at, and then unfortunately the foul calls that seemed to get called in their last game. Some people were calling out the officials that they didn't get the team that didn't get a fair shake. That everybody's trying to push Iowa through this tournament. But again, the women's tournament has been fantastic, and they'll be back on Friday.
Yeah. Just a reminder, too, that everything that we're talking about, all these games and the women's games are on STN Sports, our mobile app. If you're not signed up, get signed up now. Just a great time to have it, because it leads into the start of the Boys of Summer with baseball kicking off. I know we had the game in Korea last week, that series between the Padres and Dodgers, but now you've got the real stuff that starts. There's a lot of kind of good stories in baseball this year. An opening weekend, or what matchups? I mean, Phillies Braves. What a great National League East matchup. Astros Yankees in the American League, and then the defending champs Rangers host the Cubs. So those are three series that really kind of jump off the page to me that should be exciting.
Yeah, and I'm the good thing about Thursday is we got a lot of daytime baseball. We get to kick things off.
Love day
or
baseball.
Start that first pitch
yeah.
with Milwaukee at the Mets, where we get to see Freddie Peralta, who's going to become the new ace of this Brewers team with the fact that they traded Corbin Burns and Woodward is out for the year. And then we go right into Corbin Burns with his new team,
right.
kind of the vogue team in the American League this year. We talk about Houston being probably the best team in the American League, but a lot of chatter about the Baltimore Orioles and what's going on in Baltimore. And they pick up obviously a Cy Young candidate in Burns,
right.
And now to be the leader of their starter, they get to match up against the Angels, the Ohtani-less Angels
right.
there. So a good matchup there. But again, you talked about it. Some really, really fun baseball, a lot of daytime baseball. I'm looking forward to a guy, the Detroit Tigers. I think the Detroit Tigers are going to be a team that I think is going to play a little bit over their heads, a little bit better than what we've expected. They've got Tariq Skubal
right.
on the mound going up against the White Sox.
You like him to win the Cy Young.
I like Skubal to win the Cy Young. With Garrett Cole going down, I think Skubal is again, he's gonna have to put the innings in, but if you go look at how he finished the year last year, the lefty.
You do know you're talking about the Tigers,
I know,
right?
he's improved the velocity. He's an absolute strikeout magician. So if he can put up the innings, if he can stay healthy and put up that 180 to 190 innings, which is a lot for any pitcher, I think he's a sleeper for that Cy Young award. And then as we go into the late games, we'll see if everybody's going to pick on these Oakland A's the way that they did last year. The A's were one of the worst teams in baseball last year. We're expecting a lot of money to be bet against the A's again.
Pretty sure we'll be big A's fans.
The Guardians open the year at the A's with Bieber on the mound. So again, a good price you can get on the A's as a dog. But I think that as we look to Thursday night, we're going to be big Oakland A's fans if the baseball games don't go the right way. And you talked about it, potentially the best matchup of the day. Braves Phillies,
right,
Strider
right.
versus Wheeler. It's a playoff matchup with two of the top pitchers in the game.
Yankees Astros the same way. Really curious. I mean, with the Cubs now and Greg Counsell moving over there and a loaded farm system with a lot of young kids. They did re-sign Bellinger again. Kind of anxious to see how the Cubs play, and then they're all chasing the betting favorite, and that's the Dodgers.
Yeah, with Glass now on the mound as
right.
well, playing the Cardinals, and we'll see if the Ohtani bets, what kind of distraction that's going to cause throughout these first couple weeks.
I was disappointed you didn't catch the betting favorite, the Dodgers. I kind of served you up just kind of an eephus pitch, and you didn't hit it.
It's something that I think that. Again, if there's wrongdoing, it should come out and he should be penalized. If there's no wrongdoing, it should be wiped and let's move on with the season. Let's not let this something that lingers out there. And obviously the jokes are gonna fly for several weeks and months. And if he comes out and has bad games and they lose, it's gonna be a question mark there. But let's be innocent until proven guilty.
Right. One last thing, too, guys. I know we've touched on a lot in the sports side of it. But don't forget, when you sign up for STN Sports, it's one wallet. You get both race and sports. We're in the Derby prep race season. We've got $10,000 Twin Qs coming up on March 30th and April 6th. For the Kentucky Oaks 10 and for Kentucky Derby, 20K Twin Qs. So come on in, play the Qs, have some fun. It's a great time to really be a race hand sports.
Yeah, and if you don't know, right on your app, bottom left is sports. The next tab over is racing. That'll open all the tracks up for you. Again, Chucky talked about it. We have got all the Derby preps. These next kind of 2 weeks are all the big races where you're going to see those 3-year-olds that are running in the Kentucky Derby. They're going to be running in these races. The $10,000 Twin Q on March 30th, $10,000 Twin Q on April 6th. Those you got to come into the book for, be able to play them over the counter
right.
or at the kiosk. But again, some big money to
right.
be made. Your phrase, the $2 to turn matchsticks into lumberyards. But a $2 Twin Q bet can win you that $10,000 Twin Q prize.
And this weekend, you've got the Dubai World Championship. So although the books might not be open, on the app, you'll be able to play. I think it's the second race that we actually start booking around 5:30, 5:45 a.m. our time. So if you have the app, you can play those early races from Dubai as well.
And, you know, we didn't talk about an NBA or NHL, but we're really heating up in the playoff races, in particular the NHL, some really tight playoff races, and really our Vegas Golden Knights are involved really in that,
Every
in that
game,
last spot in the wild card in the Western Conference, kind of fighting with the Blues, the big kind of disappointment of blowing the game to Nashville last night. But again,
Nashville's been red hot. I mean, you look at Nashville, I think in their last 18 games, 34 points they've gotten. They've been red hot the way they played. So that was a bad loss after having a 3-0 lead.
The Knights are going to have to find some success with the goaltending if they're going to hold things off. But again, to pick up 2 points on the trip, a big win in St. Louis, and then picking up a point in Nashville. So they're still in the spot. They're still in playoff spot as we sit today.
I know I keep hammering it home, guys, but we're talking about, you know, the college tournament, the NIT, the start of baseball, and we are right around the corner from both NHL and NBA playoffs. It's a great time to have STN Sports. Just a lot of cool features on it with the props, the match of the day, the odds boost. Check it out. I think you guys will love it.
I forgot to mention baseball, same game parlays.
Oh,
You've got to check out the same game parlays with baseball starting up. You can pick your team, the run line, the total, and guys
players
to hit homers, guys to get hits, strikeouts for your pitchers, and you can parlay them together. So if you like the Dodgers, you can take the Dodgers to Mookie Betts to hit a homer, to Shohei Ohtani to hit a homer, to Freddie Freeman to get a hit, and get that parlay payout. So check out the same game parlays on baseball, and all new signups. We've got a $50 no worry wager for you in the app. Just hit apply. $50, bet $50 on a game. If you lose, apply that no worry wager, and you get the $50 back in the app for all the new signups.
Super cool, guys. It's an exciting time for us. We love when you guys come out and enjoy everything we have to offer. But if you can't make it, app's a great thing to have. So for Jason, I'm Chucky. Good luck in the Sweet 16 games, the Elite 8. We'll be talking next week about kind of the Final Four, where everything is, how baseball kind of started, and where we're at with the NHL and NBA heading into the playoffs, and pro football draft props. So again, we'll see you guys next week on the Sports Betting Podcast Bookends, powered once again by STN Sports.